Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot. Of course, normally this would be a Hey, Mary Kay edition of the podcast, but we are fully in coach search mode today. So we're not going to go real long. We're just going to kind of give everybody an update because it's 6:45 right now. It's Monday night. This thing could change. This thing could change mid-podcast. This thing could change as soon as we're done recording this podcast. So who knows? This is an ever-changing situation. But Mary Kay, as we're sitting here on Monday, it feels like a pretty momentous day for this search one way or another. I'll let you do it. Why don't you get us caught up on everything that's happened today? And by the way, while all of this happened, Shedeur Sanders was named Pro Bowler. But let's get caught up on where things stand with the coaching search at about 6:45 on Monday night.
Okay, well, first of all, one of the big things that happened today was that Grant Udinski removed his name from consideration. I was surprised about that. I don't really know exactly why that happened yet, other than the fact that maybe he sensed that he wasn't going to get this job. Sometimes guys pull out because they know they're not going to get it, not because they don't want it. So we have to remember that. When all is said and done, we will find out details of, who just didn't want this thing, who wanted it and knew they weren't going to get it, who were going to get hired the next day by the Ravens or whatever. So there are all kinds of reasons for why these things happen. But nonetheless, Grant Udinski removed himself from consideration this morning. So that was the first thing that happened. And then I had been writing, as you know, that the Browns were flying out to LA to interview Nate Scheelhaase today. So that was one of the bigger little nuggets that we provided, is that they were actually going out there to interview him instead of him coming here. Now, he was coming off the NFC Championship game, and they knew that that was the best way to go about it. He was out in Seattle, he's in LA, and they went out to the West Coast to interview him. So it started early this morning, and it went through 3:30 in the afternoon LA time. That is about the amount of time that they have spent with their other second interview candidates. He was the fourth. But in the midst of his interview, in the middle of the interview, ESPN reports that he got a head coach request from the Buffalo Bills, who, by the way, still have Grant Udinski on their head coach list. He hasn't pulled out of that one. He has not pulled himself out of that one. That doesn't mean that that one was better, although they do have a better quarterback situation. So, of course, in the middle of this lengthy Browns interview, where they're probably getting pretty close to deciding that maybe this could be our guy, he gets a second interview request from the Buffalo Bills. And of course, they've got Josh Allen. The Browns don't have a Josh Allen to offer. Now, as we tape this right now, and again, as you mentioned at the outset, things can change on a dime. But as of right now, he's scheduled to take that interview with the Buffalo Bills. But Grant Udinski is still in the running for the Buffalo Bills. I believe Brian Daboll is still in the running for the Buffalo Bills, as are a number of other coaches. So don't know exactly where this is going to go yet, but it was going to be incumbent upon Nate Scheelhaase today to prove to the Cleveland Browns that he could handle everything that comes with this head coaching job. And I don't know how that went today. I really don't know how that went. Maybe that has something to do with all of a sudden now he's taking this Bills interview. Maybe he sensed that he needed to take the Bills interview. Maybe he needed to put some pressure on the Cleveland Browns. But I will say this. Jim Schwartz is still in it, and Todd Monken is still in it. Todd Monken has flown under the radar. But earlier today, I was told that he was still in it. And even later this afternoon, I was told that he was still in it. So it's really kind of tricky to say exactly where this might end up. But if things don't work out with Nate Scheelhaase, the Browns still have two candidates that they really like a lot in their own defensive coordinator, Jim Schwartz, who's been a strong candidate from the start, always been in it, and the Ravens offensive coordinator, Todd Monken. And there is a world in which those two can end up on this team together. Todd would be the head coach. Jim Schwartz would be the defensive coordinator. I don't know if it would happen the other way. I don't necessarily see it happening flip-flopped, because I really thought that Todd Monken would go join John Harbaugh with Jackson Dart and the New York Giants if he doesn't get this head coaching job. But stranger things have happened. So these things are all still hanging in the balance. Now, Anthony Lynn, where does he fit into the mix? He interviewed with them on Saturday night. It helped them become Rooney Rule compliant, but I don't see him yet getting a second interview with the Cleveland Browns, which means to me, and maybe he wouldn't need one, but I don't necessarily think he's in the mix right now. I think it's Nate, see what he's going to do. And I think it's Jim Schwartz. And I think it's Todd Monken.
Do you think at this point, like when Udinski dropped out, do you think Nate became the favorite? Like he's maybe the guy that they want for sure. And again, maybe he had to still do some selling of himself to them. They probably have to do some selling of themselves to him. But if they sort of had their way about it, that would be the guy that they would want.
Yeah, it either happened like that or somehow Grant Udinski got the sense that they were more interested in hiring Nate Scheelhaase than him. Maybe he got the sense that Nate was already number one before he pulled out. We don't know the answer to that. Or maybe, and I don't know. I know that there have been coaches that have been involved with this search that haven't been overly enamored with the quarterback situation. That should be no surprise, right? Some of them are not really certain about what's happening at the quarterback situation. And if they have another opportunity with a better quarterback situation, then chances are they're going to keep their options open for that other job or wait for another job. I mean, nobody really knows what's going to happen with the Browns QB situation. And not just this year, but even next year. How high of a draft pick are they going to get? This particular year, they don't really have a shot at one of the best premier quarterbacks in this draft. And there really are not very many quarterbacks becoming available in the free agency market or the trade market or whatever. At least that's how it looks right now. It's not a good year once again to need a quarterback, just like last year. So because of that, you either have to have a comfort level with Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders, or maybe some sleeper pick in the draft that we don't know about, but I think that's a long shot. Or you have to think Malik Willis or someone else like that. But if you don't like the quarterback landscape for this year, sometimes these coaches are one and done, right? And I don't know that the Browns have a tolerance level for another 3-win season or a 4-win season. I don't know that they have that. So some of these coaches might be looking at this situation and thinking, we just don't know how we are going to get to winning in 2026 with this quarterback situation. And that's basically where that stands.
Well, and the other part of that I keep coming back to is if you're a Grant Udinski or a Nate Scheelhaase and you're a young guy and Andrew Berry chooses you and hires you, I think to your point, if this team for some reason goes 4-13 or 5-12 again, what does that mean for the guy who hired you all of a sudden? It just feels like a very unstable situation to come into. And I mean, for him and Udinski, these are both guys that have been such fast risers. It does feel like, and look, this can change year to year. You never know for sure. I mean, I just saw Bobby Slowick get a job recently, and I remember a couple years ago, he was like the hottest of hot names, after the Texans made that little run with CJ Stroud. And now he sort of has become an afterthought, so it can change quickly. But, these two guys do sort of have to weigh this idea of, is this the way I want my career to start? When, maybe next year I could do it again. And these teams, maybe even the Browns again, these teams might have some really high draft picks in a draft that is supposed to be much stronger than this one.
Right. I mean, there should be some really good quarterbacks coming out next year in Arch Manning and Lenore Sellers, and there will be more. The quarterback bonanza that was supposed to happen this year, it didn't happen. And unless you really like a Nussmeier or a Beck or one of those guys in a later round, you're really going to be kind of out of the quarterback draft class for this coming draft in April. So it's a very tricky situation. And if the Browns are either counting on Deshaun Watson to stay healthy and be the quarterback that he was in Houston, or for Shador Sanders to completely flourish and excel with a better supporting cast, those are a lot of big ifs. And I'm sure that it's giving some of these guys pause.
So it feels like look, Udinski kind of became the fan favorite for a while. Obviously Schillhouse has been on that list, and with Udinski pulling out, obviously he instantly became a fan favorite. I do feel like for as weird as this process has felt, for as crazy as today has been, just this however many hours, this 16 hours so far today or whatever. uh, If this ends up with Nate Scheelhaase, I don't know that that'll work or not. I don't know if he's going to be a good head coach or not, but that's at least interesting. And I could see how the Browns could sell that. And, he's a guy that they identified early. They waited him out. They got him. Forget everything else. They got a guy they wanted. I think it's a harder sell for Todd Monken and Jim Schwartz, especially Jim Schwartz, because that's the one that feels more like an afterthought. How do you think fans would ultimately embrace that hire? And do you think the Browns could ultimately sell that to this fan base after they kind of got riled up over guys like Udinski, some of these young offensive minds who are still in vogue, even with two defensive coaches going to the Super Bowl this year?
Well, I think that they would have to just play upon the fact that he ran just an amazing defense here, that he's won a Super Bowl, that he's been a defensive coordinator for so many years, that he has head coaching experience. The players love him. Miles wants him. Denzel wants him. So I think there are plenty of selling points for him. I think that that is something that they can sit there at that press conference and do a really good job on those particular selling points. So I don't think it would be the end of the world. I think Jim Schwartz, I actually have been saying for a long time, I think Jim Schwartz would be an excellent head coach in his second go around because he's probably learned so much. But I do think that there is some thought to putting your resources on the offensive side of the ball. And if you want somebody like a Todd Monken, you're probably going to have to hire him as the head coach, because if not, he's probably headed over to New York to work with John Harbaugh. So I don't know how that's going to go, but yeah, it'll be interesting because, as I have said before, Todd Monken has flown under the radar. He sort of came out of left field in this whole search, but there are a lot of things to like about Todd Monken. I mean, he runs a very explosive offense. He runs a very pass-oriented offense. He did a tremendous job with Lamar Jackson. He did a great job with that Ravens offense. He's got tons of experience. So I don't know. I could see it too.
Yeah, Munkin's the one that keeps, I think, because he's been so under the radar and because we know that OC opportunity's out there and he hasn't taken it yet and he's still kind of hanging out there. That's the one that is just in the back of my mind. Like, for all the talk of Schwartz and Schillhouse and Udinski, is this where it's going to ultimately end up? That just kind of sticks out, especially with the way this organization operates. But I will say, I have spent the better part of the last week talking myself into Nate Scheelhaase. I've learned how to spell his name. I've learned how to pronounce it. I've read up on his background. I do think he's a really interesting candidate. And I do think if this ultimately ends with him getting that job, once again, nobody knows who's going to be a head coach and who isn't. But I think it's a shot worth taking. And if it doesn't work, okay, whatever. Like, if it doesn't work with Jim Schwartz or Todd Monken, the same result's going to happen. Everybody's going to get pushed out the door anyway. I still like the idea of putting my eggs in the basket of a young upcoming coach. If I believe he can stand in front of that room of 53 guys, that does include Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward and a bunch of very, outspoken, very talented defensive players. If he can stand in front of that room and control it and lead that team, that's still kind of the way I'm leaning, is to go. Now, I thought maybe Udinski was a little too young. I would have been more nervous about him, but I do think if this ends up with Schillhouse, I think they can sell us all on that. Hey, this process ended up working, and I think I would agree with that. I think they would end up getting a guy that would be. It's a good risk to take, I think.
I agree with you on that. They, like I said, they have to have had a comfort level today when they sat with him face to face and shook his hand and looked into his eye. And Jimmy's got that handshake, right? I mean, like, you have to be able to stand up to these guys, and you have to be able to show that you can command a room, and you have to be able to prove that when a player is late for a meeting and you have to discipline him in some way, that you're going to be able to do that, or when you have to suspend somebody, or whatever you have to do, that you have what it takes to do that when you have only been in the NFL for 2 years. And if they have a comfort level with that, then I do think there's a good chance that they will try to make him an offer. The other thing that will happen here is the fact that they will support him. They will surround him with senior NFL advisors in some ways. You would probably, hopefully for them, have Jim Schwartz as your defensive coordinator. You wouldn't have to worry really about that side of the ball. You'd really mostly have to worry about the offensive side of the ball. And of course, you're probably going to have to worry about special teams if you end up with a new special teams coordinator. So you're going to have some things that you're going to have to deal with. But they would give him some senior advisors and some help. They're not going to throw him to the wolves and expect him to do all of this on his own in his 3rd year in the NFL. But still, it's a tall order. It's a tall order. And I wonder what the thinking is on the part of the powers that be after they spent this whole entire day with him.
Yeah, and you tweeted this out earlier today, just about this idea of all of these second interviews have been pretty long for the
Mm-hmm.
Browns. I think you tweeted it out when this interview had been going on about 7 hours or so, and you basically said this is how long the second interviews have been for this
Right.
football team. So it's not surprising that they were there that long and this interview lasted that long. I do think there was a sentiment, this idea of when this Bills report came out. Man, don't let him leave the room. Don't, throw that offer on the table and make him say no. I don't know how realistic that actually is. And a lot of that comes down to how comfortable they would feel doing that. And also, would he actually take the job? But I don't know. Are you surprised that they did end up, after that Bills report came out, are you surprised that they did end up willing to walk out and willing to let him do that virtual interview with Buffalo?
Well, it's not over until it's over, right?
Right.
And will he actually go through with this interview with Buffalo? Jimmy Haslam is a closer. Jimmy's a closer. And what happened when Deshaun Watson was not coming here to Cleveland? What happened to that?
Jimmy wrote a pretty big check.
Jimmy wrote an enormous check and got it done. He gave Deshaun Watson something very unique. The only fully guaranteed contract in the history of the NFL, and there's never been another one since. $230 million, fully guaranteed. Jimmy got the job done. When Jimmy wants something, Jimmy's going to get it. And if he wants Nate Scheelhaase, I think he'll get him. It's just a matter of how and when. Now, the question is he their man? Do they want him that much? Are they prepared to go the extra mile, or do they have some leverage? Are they saying, hey, we've got Todd Monken and Jim Schwartz, so if you want to go do this interview, go do the interview, but hey, like, our opportunity might dry up for you if you go do that, right? I mean, these are the kinds of things that go on in these negotiations. Are the Bills really at this moment in time, do you think, going to just pull Nate Scheelhaase from the bottom of the candidate list that they have and hire him? I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe they absolutely will. But some of this could be gamesmanship that's going on. Gamesmanship. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get more news tonight. I wouldn't be surprised.
I think we can acknowledge that it was a very weird situation where in the middle of this interview, there's a tweet that comes out that the Bills have requested permission to interview him. And it only came from one person. It was only Adam Schefter at that point. Now, since then, after the interview has concluded, we've seen some other people say now he's going to go interview with the Bills or whatever. We've seen other people pick up on that. But it's not like there were 5 people that tweeted that out at once, like we see sometimes, where the text just goes out to everybody.
Yep.
So that struck me as a little bit of like, okay, Not that something's off, but at least like, okay, this probably came out for a very specific reason. And so now let's see where this goes.
Absolutely 100%. And I just do think that it has something to do with gamesmanship. Maybe in the middle of this thing, you call the Bills and you say, hey, we've got this great guy that is willing to take an interview with you if you'd like to have it. So, I mean, you never know. That's how this could be going. That's how these agents sometimes operate. You have to get some leverage, right? You've got to get something going. You have to get some tension. You have to get the 11th hour deal making going. So that could be part of it. But sometimes when you do something like that, you do run the risk of thinking that you're calling someone's bluff and then they go in another direction. I mean, the Browns could just say, we don't want to deal with this. You know, we were 80% sure about you, but now we'll go offer this job to somebody else. So don't know how this is going to go yet. I don't know how this is going to go. Part of me was thinking, geez, they should just call Sean McDermott and say, you know what, Sean?
Yeah.
Do you really want to take a year off?
In the middle of the Schillhouse interview, they should have said, we've requested permission to interview Sean McDermott. Or they wouldn't have to request permission. We've called Sean McDermott and we're going to interview him.
Exactly. I mean, just pick up one of your other phones in there and just like call him right in the middle of the interview. Hey, Sean, what's up? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where this is going to go yet. And I don't know if they're going to have, excuse me, I don't know if they're going to have some big news breaking tonight. Who knows? What if they're not completely 100% done? What if they just pull some kind of rabbit out of a hat?
Yeah. Well, and also that whole idea of, if this was a leverage play, that's also basically saying like, okay, do you believe this guy's the next Sean McVay, or do you just think he's a really interesting candidate? Like how convicted are you that this guy is the next great offensive head coach? And if they don't believe that, if they're just really intrigued by him, and that changes the offer you would make to him. You're not going to go all in on that guy if you kind of view him as even with the other whoever else might be in this, which we know Jim Schwartz, Todd Monken, and whoever else that maybe we don't know about could be in this. So that's part of this too.
Right. And some of these guys, and we don't know fact from fiction right now. We just don't. But,
Right.
I'll be scrolling and about different coaches and I say, oh, Chris Shula didn't interview well with the Steelers. Or, I saw somebody earlier saying that Grant didn't interview well with the Browns. Well, I heard that he did interview well with the Browns. So we don't know what's true. We don't know what's false. But the point here is that you really don't know for sure about a coach until you sit with him face to face and you interview him in person for 6 or 7 hours. You don't know, because we know that the Cleveland Browns have put so much into this coaching search, that they've done so much background on these guys. And you're talking about a coach who's been in the NFL for 2 years versus Jim Schwartz, who's been around forever. Todd Monken, who has coached for 37 years, right? So, you've got to be able to talk a really good game. And you watch these playoffs and you're talking about going up against the Mike Vrabels and the the coaches like that in the NFL, and now the Mike McDonalds and some of these really incredible coaches, and you've got to be able to convince the Cleveland Browns that you're ready to do that. And he's never called a play. He's never been a coordinator. And maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe he has everything that it takes and they are going to offer him the job and he's going to knock it out of the park. But there's a lot that has to happen in a 7-hour interview or a 6-hour interview in person with these very, very smart, tough-minded individuals who are asking for homework assignments and essays and all of those kinds of things. They're not messing around here. I mean, they are digging deep into a person's psyche and soul and personality, and they're looking for the person. They're not looking necessarily for, can you draw up a Sean McVay play and top him? That's not necessarily where they're going with this. This is, you are the leader of our organization, tasked with taking this team to the next level, to becoming a perennial contender? And do you have what it takes to do that?
Yeah, and look, the reality is nobody knows, right? With a lot of these guys, look, we all knew Mike Vrabel would be pretty good, right? We knew that, but nobody knew Mike McDonald would be this. Nobody knew Kevin Stefanski in those first few years in Cleveland. Nobody knew he would be what he was. Nobody knew who Sean McVay was going to be. So, this time a year ago, people were making fun of Liam Cohen getting hired and the way he said Duval in a press conference. And now his offensive coordinator is one of the hottest young candidates on the market, and that seems like a great hire. So it's just impossible to know. Obviously one of these older guys isn't going to win the press conference, but we'll see what happens from there if they end up getting that guy, if they end up getting Schillhouse. Like I said, I think that would be a fun hire, but again, nobody knows for sure. And to your point, at the end of the day, everybody says they got their guy. So we'll see. All right. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I don't have a huge problem, by the way, with the personality tests and the essays and the other data that the Browns are collecting on their head coaches. This is a very difficult job, and you're going to be working with Harvard educated people all over that building. Really, really smart people. And you have to be able to prove to them that you mentally have what it takes to do this job, and that you have the IQ and the football acumen to hang with them and to do this job. I mean, think about that. Andrew Berry has said it's like a marriage, right? Between the head coach and the GM. Well, you better bring your brains when you're going to be dealing with Harvard educated Andrew Berry. Even when we just sit at a press conference talking to him, the words that spill out of his mouth and the way that he speaks, this is a brilliant human being, right? So you've got to be able to hang. You have got to be able to hang with these guys, and Andrew Berry in particular, if you are going to be married to him. So I don't have a huge problem with the way that they're conducting their search. I don't have a big problem with it all. I was kidding around with somebody earlier. I was just like, just put the essay question into Chat GPT and off you go.
Yeah, right.
But I just don't have a problem with that. And I think they're trying to weed out some of the people that might not be what they're looking for with this front office and with this team of people as they take this team into the future. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a little like if they're the only team that does this, and I can't imagine they're the only team that does stuff like this. I don't know, maybe they are. It's a little weird. And I think my feelings kind of got summed up. There was somebody who tweeted, if this story came out about the Packers or the Ravens or the Patriots, people would be praising it. Like it was, oh my God, look how brilliant they are. And my reaction was kind of like, well, yeah, that's kind of the point though, is people are laughing at it because it's the Browns and they're kind of touting doing something different, and it just hasn't worked. Like that's why you get laughed at, because you won 8 games in 2 years. So, I mean, I don't mind it. I don't mind being a little bit different. I don't mind doing things a little bit differently, but it's got to work. That's the bottom line, is it's got to work. It's got to lead you to the right person. And if 2 years from now, the guy they hired has won 8 games in 2 years again, it's like, okay, you guys were touting you're different and you're touting your process, like it didn't work. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I don't mind them being different. I don't mind them trying different things, but at some point it has to work and it has to yield results. And some people would argue it did when they hired Kevin Stefanski. That obviously that didn't end well, but it started well. So, right. I guess that's where I'm at with it.
Well, they did use this whole process with Kevin Stefanski,
right.
and it did yield a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year. However, you have to give that coach a quarterback. You got to give that coach
True.
a quarterback.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? Like you've got to pair the coach and the quarterback, find a good OC if you have a defensive guy, all that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, every time I see all the things that they're looking for in a head coach, it's like, that's Kevin Stefanski, right? I mean, like, he's smart. He's level-headed. He's so bright. He can assemble a staff. He can do all these things. He can lead a team. He doesn't, go up and down with the wind. And he didn't have a quarterback. He did not have a quarterback. John Harbaugh had a quarterback for those 18 years. Mike Tomlin had quarterbacks for most of his 19 years. That's how you last. You last because you have a quarterback. So we'll see. You can be the smartest guy in the room, but you're not going to win if you don't have a quarterback.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I think some guys, it's just not going to be their what they want. It's not going to be their flavor. And I do want, like, obviously, the Mike Vrabel discussion has come back up a little bit, and I do think, like, I don't know if Mike Vrabel would have taken this job last year, but I do wonder if, like, spending a year in that building, if he would have just been like, yeah, I know this was my hometown team, but this just might not be. This might not be for me. I think I'd rather go back to where I became a Hall of Famer, a Patriots Hall of Famer. I'd rather go back there and coach there. So, I don't know for sure how that would have gone, but I do think it does it puts you in a spot where I think you're just not going to be everybody's, including some very good candidates. You're not going to be everybody's flavor.
Absolutely. And vice versa, right? So, I mean, there were just some people that were not going to fit here and some people that just would have wanted no part of this kind of a situation. And, we'll find out. It has to be, it has to be a fit. There's a culture here. And if it's not a fit, then you don't belong. And they will know that you don't belong and you're not going to be able to fake it. So, we'll see how this goes. Like I said, I should probably be drinking some caffeine tonight because, I'm going to fall asleep and they're going to hire their coach at 2 o'clock in the morning or
Yeah,
something.
right.
And I'm going to end up waking up to that. But, yeah, because they're in California right now. So could be a long night.
All right. Well, you can keep your Breaking Bad marathon going.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. I
all
will do
right.
that.
Well, listen, I don't think you guys understand how stressful it was for Mary Kay to get her in front of this camera, sitting here for half an hour to talk about this coaching search on a day when anything can happen. So we're going to wrap things up there. You can find us on Instagram, Orange and Brown Talk. Our Twitter's Orange Brown Talk. Of course, our YouTube is Cleveland Browns on cleveland.com. And yeah, Football Insider, cleveland.com/Browns, the blue banner at the top of the page. If news breaks, obviously you'll see Mary Kay tweet it and we'll send it out to our texters as well. So, Mary Kay, I appreciate you taking a little breather from this coaching search to do this podcast here.
Yeah, and no one was hired while we were taping. So
Exactly. All right. We will wrap things up there. Thanks for listening, everybody.